You know, if you're watching this video, you probably have some experience with a brain injury, or maybe you're having it now with somebody in your family or you. A brain injury can be very disruptive to our common everyday life. It is the invisible injury because so many people with a brain injury look normal, and therefore, unlike people who have suffered an obvious physical injury like an amputation, you may be really hurt, but nobody around you realizes it, and they don't give you the time and attention that you need. You know, our entire body is built just to carry our brain around. Everything we are, everything we feel, all that we perceive, everything we love is all right here in our brain. And when it's damaged, it makes massive changes in our lives. One of the big frustrations for family members and for the person injured is that they're not the same. So we don't see this injury oftentimes, and we can't understand why this person doesn't react the same way, why they may have a short temper, why they may not be able to keep up with conversation. For instance, there are times when people suffer a brain injury and they cannot get information into their brain, find it in their brain, retrieve it, and express it as well and as fast as they did before. So you might say a sentence paragraph to them, and without realizing it, that person you're talking to with the brain injury can only hear and digest about the first sentence and a half of that paragraph before they're falling behind, not understanding and not remembering what you're saying. You can imagine how frustrating that is for the person who's telling that story or giving those instructions, and how scary it is for a brain injured person to be at work and be given instructions and not be able to follow what the boss is saying. One of the things that's very important for all of us if we're affected by brain injury, or a loved one or a friend who's affected by brain injury, is to make sure we get the counseling and the information we need to understand how to support them, to understand how to be patient and realize that's not that person talking. They're not mad at me. That's the brain injury that's talking. There's so many dynamics to this. Sometimes when a person has memory loss from a brain injury, their brain will fill in information, and they'll be absolutely convinced that the conversation that you had with them went a certain way and certain things were said, when in fact you are just as convinced it didn't. That's not what was said. That's not what we experienced together, even though we're talking to each other in the same room. So what do you do with that when the brain injured person becomes angry because they don't feel like they're being believed, and you're getting angry because you're frustrated? That requires some knowledge, some working together and understanding. Patience is primary to successful change that's going to have to occur when a family member is brain injured. There is life after brain injury, but you need to make sure that you are seeing the professionals and getting the care you need. Now, one of the things that's just true is that oftentimes in a brain injury situation, there is a lot of treatment in the acute phase, just the weeks and months after the brain injury occurs. But then the medical professionals go on to other cases, and you're left really alone. So it's very important that you be consistent in getting care and getting follow-up. Now, if you have been injured, suffered a brain injury because someone else caused the injuries, you need to find a lawyer who has experience with brain injury, someone who knows how to counsel the family, how to make sure that there's proper care being given, to make sure that the types of providers for medical and psychological care are obtained, and that there's a consistency and a follow-up, let alone the task of putting that client's story together, making sure that all of the injuries are understood as well as the long-term effects of those injuries. How is it going to affect the ability to work? the physical ability to exercise, the emotional stability of that person, and what they need in their life. For instance, it's very common that somebody that has a brain injury suffers depression, or has pain syndromes, or migraine headache syndromes, all of which need to be evaluated, treated, and put together in such a way that a judge, a jury, or an insurance company can understand the value of those future needs and make sure that that attorney then has the skill set and the experience to make sure that you and your family are taken care of. I want to tell you a story about one of the many clients I've had with traumatic brain injuries over the last 30 years. This young woman had been riding her bicycle. She was a world-class triathlete. She got hit by a car, knocked unconscious, broken bones. She woke up in the hospital in a brain injury rehab unit. Her children came in and she couldn't name them. She had 2 young kids. You can imagine what her husband felt like when she couldn't name her own children, or how she felt. The frustration of knowing that you love these little children but you can't say their names. She was a professional, and now the question arises, will she ever work again? Will she be able to contribute an income to the household? Will she be able to take care of her children or love her husband in the same way as she had before? One of the first things that we did was, at her request, go to the hospital and help to begin to map out a road to recovery, not just for her physically and cognitively, but for her entire family, how they would get the counseling they need, how we could team with the physicians at the hospital to make sure that the rehab facility she would go to, that the steps that we would take over the next months and perhaps even years to pursue full recovery would be properly pursued, coordinated, and funded, because that's our job. Now, fortunately, she not only, after over a full year's work and rehab, not only did she return to riding her bicycle again and swimming and running and competing in triathlons, but she discovered the new person that she'd become. The person that had been hit on the bicycle that day had changed, and changed forever. She had to deal with memory loss, with depression, with the drive of this very driven, gifted young woman to make that recovery and become and maximize the woman that she could be in the future. We're so proud of her and the steps that she took and the success that she's had to return her to very high function and to return her to her family. Can you imagine how scary it is to have your future taken away because of a brain injury, to not know if your relationships can continue into the future as you become this new person? The feeling of loss, loneliness, fear. Addressing those things is very important, and to do it as early as possible, to get a picture and a roadmap as to where to go. You need a team, a recovery team, a legal recovery team, a medical recovery team, a rehab team, and a plan for the future. Now is the time to act if you've suffered a brain injury. Don't delay.